Now, on that same day, the day when Jesus had appeared to Mary Magdalene, two disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it's now the 3rd day since these days took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they didn't find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that Jesus was alive. Some of those who were there with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they didn't see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near to the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on, but they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." And then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the gospel of the Lord for you this day. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. Hello. As Pastor Jennifer already told you, my name is Pastor Delaney, and I serve St. Paul's Lutheran Church, your partner congregation, located in the historic Near West Side neighborhood of Milwaukee. We are just down the street from Marquette University, if you know where that is, at 28th and Wisconsin Avenue. And I was so happy when Pastor Jennifer invited me to come preach with you, because I've been wanting to get to know you a bit more. My first call was at North Cape Lutheran Church in Western Racine County, and I had the opportunity to go to El Salvador with some Galileans at that time. And I was very excited to be reunited with my El Salvador friends this weekend. But mostly, I love this story. And I was so happy that on the weekend I'd been invited to preach with my new friends and my old friends here at Galilee. I got the road to Emmaus. Now, I am not a person who prepares way ahead of time, so I didn't know that this was the lucky happenstance for me until Monday, but man, am I excited. This story, this 7-mile walk at the end of the Gospel of Luke, is one of my favorite stories in all of Scripture. I like the mysterious traveler. I like the bread at the end, yum. And I especially like that Cleopas is walking along with an unnamed companion. Because I like to imagine that unnamed companion is Cleopas's spouse or partner, another faithful disciple. In this way, we can all imagine ourselves in the story, can't we? This story was the gospel at my wedding, and it is the biblical touchstone that I often come back to when I want to think about how Jesus might show up in the world around me, especially in pastoring and partnering with neighborhood people and organizations and engaging in the congregation I get to serve. So, picture it. Our story opens on a remote road a few miles outside Jerusalem as two people walk along, talking together in hushed tones. Their hands are clasped together between them. One carries a bag filled with bread and fish and oil on their back. Having picked up some provisions before leaving the city, these two people walk slowly along the open road, miles from their destination, hearts heavy. Upon a closer look, it is clear that these two people are distressed. Their eyes are bloodshot, there's bags underneath, and they look as though they haven't slept in days. The one, called Cleopas's beard is fuzzy, as though his hands have been worrying it. His companion's braid is a mess, pulled over one shoulder with half the hair left out the other side, just hanging down her back, as though she was completely preoccupied when she plaited it this morning. They walk and they talk and they fall into companionable silence, when all of a sudden, somebody else shows up on this wilderness road, walking briskly to catch up with them. He looks like an older man with crinkly eyes and a walking stick, a solid frame, and weathered sandals. He catches up to the travelers, so caught up in their own world that they don't even hear him show up. When he interrupts their thoughts and asks them what they're discussing, the two snap out of their glazed reverie to look incredulously at this impertinent traveler. What are they discussing? What else but the unbelievable claim that their beloved teacher and prophet Jesus, who they all saw die on Friday, has come back to life after being executed by Rome? They turn to one another and this mysterious traveler and begin to tell them about Jesus, their friend, their leader, who was killed. How they'd placed their hopes in him. How he had led them and loved them and healed their friends and fed all of them with hope and food. And how he died at the hands of the empire, just like so many others who dared to hope that things could change and redemption could happen. And now, some people were saying that he had been raised. What a cruel joke, thought Cleopas and his companion. After all, they saw Jesus killed and saw him hang his head and breathe his last. Their friends had laid him in a tomb. They saw the boulder rolled in front of the entrance. And they were old enough to know that people die and they don't come back. That this foolish tale Mary and her friends had shared was just that, foolishness. It couldn't be true. Resurrection doesn't happen. And as much as they loved and trusted their fellow disciples, Mary and the others to whom they had entrusted the task of caring for Jesus' body, the idea that he was alive was just taking it too far. Jesus was gone. They had hoped it would be different, but it wasn't. The idea that the tomb was empty, that Jesus has been raised, was just too much to be true. There was too much evidence to the contrary. I get that feeling. Do you? Too much evidence to the contrary. We are a lot like Cleopas and his companion. I feel their disbelief in my bones at times. After all, we live in a world where we see pain and suffering all the time. You know that old saying about death and taxes. It's inevitable. People die and they don't come back. Hope is nice, but what does it mean when we only have to turn on our TV or open our favorite news or social app to know that the tombs aren't empty? We know the conversation Cleopas and his companion are having because we've had it too. In our living rooms, in our cars, on our phones, on our own road to Emmaus. Every time another school is invaded with violence, every time another book gets banned or another politician seeks power through fear, or we keep fighting each other, every time we hear another update from Ukraine or Sudan, every time we look around our life or our tables or our homes and we notice who's missing. The prevalence of grief, of that "we had hoped" phrase, is so palpable in the human experience. We know that feeling intimately because that feeling is part of what it means to be alive. And we know that the empty tomb story can sound just like a story. Foolishness, a nice idea, but a little more like a pipe dream than reality. And my friends, Jesus knows that too. He knows that Cleopas and his companion are caught up in grief and unbelief and fear and sorrow. So he comes in a way that they don't know it's him, that they'll tell him how they feel. So he listens to their pain. He observes the heavy slump in their shoulders, the bags under their eyes. Jesus gets close enough to see that they had hoped for something and now they feel like fools. Jesus comes close and he listens and then he shares. He knows it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of trying, a lot of different ways of showing and telling that Easter is here for his friends to believe that it could be true. He tried the tomb with Mary, the angel messengers. He tried Peter running back to prove that the women had told the truth. And now he tries the stranger, approaching the people he loves in a way that they don't recognize, asking them to tell him exactly what they're talking about. And then he tries again, trying a new way to meet them, to show and tell that the rumors are true, that Christ has triumphed over the grave and the cross and despair. At the end of the walk, Jesus goes home with them, joins them for dinner, watches with a secret smile as they unpack the fish and the bread and the oil, and then reveals something incredible in a way that they can't explain, but they also can't deny. In the breaking of the bread, just like he did the last time they ate dinner together, Jesus reveals his identity. He shows them that he's here, that he's alive, that the strange, tingly, heart-burny sensation they felt on the road wasn't a fluke, it wasn't a lie, it wasn't a story. Jesus shows them and tells them and makes it clear in a way that they can recognize that they are not foolish for hoping. That hope comes from God. Milo's hoping for his bottle right now. Jesus makes it clear that hope is not a fool's errand. That hope comes from God and that God is able to do things like come back, triumph, show up along the road of grief, and bring Easter to glorious bloom even there. And friends, that is true for us too. You see, God knows that it's hard for you and me to believe. God knows that we are slow of heart, that the world is full of a whole lot of evidence to the contrary, that sometimes we wonder if Easter can even matter. So God keeps trying, keeps coming close in new and different ways, keeps hoping on our behalf, keeps working resurrection in a million different facets and opportunities and experiences every day all over the planet because God knows that we need the show and tell. The revelation that Jesus has been there all along, right beside you, bringing new life and hope and resurrection to your own places of skepticism or grief. I don't think Jesus minds that we're not sure. I don't think Jesus minds that we think we're foolish for hoping. Instead, he just shows up again and again and again in so many different ways because he knows that we need a lot of different ways for hope to grow, for the power of death to be drowned out by the reality of God's new life. One of my favorite theologians, Anna Madsen, says, "Death is real, but life is realer." I love that phrase. That's what I think Easter is, and I wonder if that's what Jesus is doing on the road, in the bread, in your life and mine, coming near and reminding us every day through the surprising activity of Easter that death is real, that bad stuff is really bad, that grief is really heavy. But life is realer. God's resurrection power is able to transform despair into hope, bring our broken Good Friday world to Easter joy, and I don't know how, and you don't have to know how, but God just does it anyway. I'm with you this weekend to talk about partnership, about meeting our neighbors at St. Paul's, and trust me, we'll talk about it tomorrow. But my friends, this story of a risen God who meets us exactly where we are in ways that we can recognize is what partnership is really built on. This is the thing that binds us together. It's why I'm in this room. It's why you're in this room. This story, this hope. The hope of an empty tomb and a very committed Jesus who knows that we have a very hard time believing in the good stuff. So he just keeps coming near and reminding you and reminding me a million times every day that hope isn't foolish, that Christ is risen, that death is real, and life is so much realer. Amen.